You are listening to Missed Apex Podcast. We live F1. Welcome to Missed Apex Podcast. I'm your host, Richard Reddy, but my friends call me Spanners, so let's be friends. Today, we talk to a legitimate broadcasting and journalistic F1 legend. James Allen pops into the shed. He speaks to us outside of Maranello to talk about his new podcast, James Allen on F1, where he gets in depth with interviews from people really in the heart of the Formula One industry. And then me and Chris sit down and we discuss the F1 news of the day. But first, before we get into any of that, I can announce now that the track for the Missed Apex meetup in Milton Keynes on the 6th of July is going to be at Formula Fast Karting. And I'm so glad we got this over the line and that we're able to do it. They're a great bunch of people. They understand racing and they've just had their new venue done up. So we are going to be recording on the mezzanine deck over the top of a kart track, starting recording at around 8 o'clock with a quiz and a panel. And there'll be the opportunity to purchase a karting slot beforehand, so you can compare yourself to Missed Apex panelists. Will you beat Brad Philpott? Yeah, probably not. Will you beat me? Yes, there's a good chance you could do that, but that's completely optional. You don't have to do that, and we will then sit down at 8 o'clock. Switch the cameras on, switch the mics on, and do a bit of Missed Apex live. And there'll be pizza and some beer, and we can all hang out and have a great time. Who will be there? Me, Brad Philpott, Matt Trumpets is flying over, Kyle Power, Alex Van Gien, Antonio Rankin, Stuffy. And I think we have Engine Mode 11, Dan Drury coming down as well. So it's a big Missed Apex panel. I hope as many of you as can make it will join us. Go and click the link in the show notes below, or go to missedapexpodcast.com/live show. Let's speak to James Allen now. So today, I was described as an F1 pundit and cited as a source by a website. So I just want to start off by apologizing to anyone who might have been fooled into thinking that that information was from a source with any credibility. I have been at great pains to point out that I'm not a journalist. I have no links into the teams or the paddock, and my fandom is for sale at a low price. So all I would say is, if you do quote me, please point out that I am a presenter, simply sharing my love and opinions of Formula One. I am a fellow F1 fan. So why should you listen to Missed Apex if it's just a bunch of idiots saying what they reckon? And I say to that, it's a good point. I think it's the patrons' fault for encouraging us to do this kind of thing. But we do every now and then bring you experts. And today, I don't think we could find a bigger one. A journalist, a TV commentator for F1 and ITV, and winner of Celebrity Mastermind. Me and Chris are joined by the fabulous James Allen. Hello, James.
Hi, guys. Thank you very much for inviting me on.
You are a Roald Dahl expert more than anything.
Yeah, I am. I mean, that seems a while ago now. They said to me, right, this when I was working for the BBC, and the years after ITV, I did 4 years at BBC, and they said, Celebrity Mastermind, do you fancy it? And I was like, of course, yeah. Who wouldn't want to sit in that daunting black chair, you know? And so what's going to be your specialist subject? So, of course, most people thought that I would suggest something F1, to do with Formula One. But the problem with that is it's like, even at that point, it was like almost 70 years of history. It's like, how are you going to learn all of that? So I've got a decent working knowledge of it, but still, you know, you get caught out. So I needed something. And my kids at that time, you know, I just read them all the Roald Dahl stories, my boys. And I thought, well, I've got a decent starting knowledge there. So it was great fun. I even went to the Roald Dahl Museum and they let me go into they've got this air-controlled room, vacuum kind of controlled room where they keep all his manuscripts. It's like fireproof and bomb-proof and everything proof. And they let me hold the manuscript of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. And I would have to say that along with meeting Ayrton Senna in the early 90s, that would be probably one of my right up there top experiences.
Can I ask what your favorite of the Roald Dahl books is? But who'd have thought we'd have got off to this sort of start?
I feel like it's my fault.
Was there a favorite?
Well, I'm a big fan of Fantastic Mr. Fox. They're all good. I mean, the Twits is always a good one as well. But yeah, there's loads of good things. Yeah,
my favorite is Boy. That's the first one I read as a kid.
I was going to Matilda because of the Danny DeVito movie. largely because that came out when I was very young.
Obviously, the main focus of our chat today is going to be Roald Dahl, but I'm going to divert briefly because you've got a fantastic new podcast that's featured on its own feed and on the Autosport YouTube channel as well, which is James Allen on F1. And I really like the angle you've taken, which is you are focusing, it looks like a lot on industry people at the moment. So you had a great chat with the most recent one with Greg Maffei, but it's really sort of diving down into the core of what's going on behind the scenes.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think the idea of the podcast is we talk to the people who are shaping the sport of Formula One, whether that be the people behind the scenes. Greg Maffei, as you mentioned, is the CEO of Liberty Media. So they own Formula One. They're the people who, since 2017, have launched Drive to Survive. They've done all the things they've done to make it into this huge, fast-growing business that it is. And he's an amazing character. So he's like F1's boss of bosses. So it was great to spend some time with him and get a feel from him about how he wants to take the sport forward. You know, he was talking a lot about getting closer to the fans, having a closer relationship with the fans, which was very, very interesting. Previous to that, we spoke to this remarkable woman called Renee Wilm, who's the CEO of the Las Vegas Grand Prix, all about what went wrong in year one and what great ideas they've got for year two. And we also spoke to the guy who made the Senna movie, which I'm sure a lot of your listeners will have enjoyed, on the anniversary, obviously, of Senna's death. And we spoke with Bianca Senna. So, yeah, we're only sort of 3 or 4 podcasts in now, but lots of great ideas for the future. And then we have like some studio guests as well, a bit like this sort of setup where usually someone from our team, someone like a John Noble or a Roberto Quincaro or Rebecca Clancy or Ben Hunt, along with someone from outside. So we've had all kinds of different voices coming in just to kind of read between the lines of what's said in the interviews and give the fans and the listeners a bit more insight.
Wait! You're making it sound too good. Okay, still.
But it'll never match up to yours, Richard. I mean, come on, let's face it.
It won't match up to people in a shed saying what they reckon, will it? It was great listening to particularly the Greg and Renee ones because I don't know, with your reputation as a stalwart in F1.
With my reputation.
With your reputation in a place like this. So they seemed very, very open and unguarded. And I'm not sure I've heard quite that insight into the business side. So Greg in particular was saying quite a lot of the quiet parts out loud, using the word franchise, with his whole heart, which a lot of people denied that F1 was going in the franchise model. And this is the grown-up part of the sport, which we don't want to acknowledge as fans because it takes away from the romance. But it is money. It's a big business.
Yeah, of course it is. But then so's football. I mean, the value. I'm a big Liverpool fan. Don't hold it against me, but I'm a big Liverpool fan. And FSG, that owns Liverpool, they bought it 11 years ago for 300 million. It's probably now worth about 3 billion. Now, what does that mean? It means that, the team is, well, first of all, the club is sustainable, but also, the team has got some great players and it's created some great memories for the fans. Hell of a lot better than it was 11 years ago when they came in. Jurgen Klopp, has made something truly magical. And that's what sport does. It moves you. It creates these amazing moments. Obviously, Formula One is the same thing. I'm not saying that the racing is better now because McLaren is worth $2 billion compared to a few years ago when it was only worth a few hundred million. But the point is, it makes it sustainable. It makes the best of the best. It elevates the standards, and the money is definitely a huge part of sport now. And let's face it, romantic as we love to be about Formula One, it's always been a sport where money's talked, even going back to the 50s and the 60s.
I'm very curious, James, about the next era of F1 ownership, because in the last couple of years we have had, the rumor mill's already beginning to turn about, is Liberty going to sell to the Saudis, the Qataris, or someone else potentially? How much room is there to grow still? Like, how do you then say to the next owner, this is how much money you can make off of Formula One now, where it seems like, we've ticked off a lot of boxes that Formula One was missing, frankly. It was behind the 8 ball, behind other sports for quite some time. So, yeah, how do we find the next one?
Has the fruit been picked? Yeah.
Well, this is the thing, isn't it? But it's like any other business, any other sport. People come along with fresh ideas. Bernie Ecclestone ran Formula One for many, many years, but he was in his late 80s, and clearly not going to be getting too engaged in digital media and YouTube and social media and all the rest of it. And Liberty saw some really easy wins there, some opportunities to really grow the sport, and also everything that there is to do with the concept of fan engagement. Formula One was miles behind sports like the NFL and NBA. And at the end of the day, everybody listening to this is to some degree a fan of Formula One. And there'll be some people listening to this and watching this who've been following the sport for 20 years. And there'll be some people who've been following it since the start of this season, and everything in between. And the more accessible you make it, whoever you are, however deep your fandom is, it's a good thing. If you've got an opportunity to see some really cool behind the scenes content with Charles Leclerc or Max Verstappen or Lewis Hamilton, that's going to only improve your enjoyment of the sport. And some people, that's all they do. They don't bother watching the races. They just look at the social and they look at the output. And all of those things have been facilitated by Liberty. And so, people with ideas run things. You've got an idea, you've set up this podcast, and you've had the success that you've had. There might be some massive American media company looking at this and thinking, I could take this Missed Apex podcast, I could make this go global, we could stick it on Apple, we could stick it on Spotify, we could do all these things, blah, blah, blah. You might or might not want to do that, but that's the way the world works, and Formula One is no different.
Yeah. So Liberty definitely did that thing of making the drivers much more accessible, and that was like deliberate, and it was almost like a watershed. Like 1 minute we had no access to the drivers, and then the next it exploded. And like Lewis Hamilton struggled with wanting to do more of that kind of stuff and maybe not being allowed, but now we know everything, including the whereabouts of Charles Leclerc's dog. So for me personally, as a something year old, I find it actually too much. I would have thought I would want to know more about the drivers, but then you get to the point where, like, oh man, the news feeds are just spammed with who Leclerc is dating and who Norris is dating. But that's for a different audience that isn't me. And so Liberty are really kind of capturing a much bigger bubble.
Yeah, and I think when you listen to the Greg Maffei interview, one of the things he says is now the next step for them is to have a closer relationship. So you've been sitting there watching the telly probably since I was commentating on ITV, back in the day, where you're literally sitting there on a sofa watching telly. You're kind of passive in the whole experience. But nowadays you can have a two-way relationship with the team. You can send your thoughts to the Formula One. You can have your voice heard. You can do all sorts of things. But what they want to do is go a step deeper than that and actually have a direct relationship. So, the Vegas Grand Prix is a good example of that. They are the promoter themselves. So instead of the promoters getting the email and the profile of you as a ticket buyer to the British Grand Prix at Silverstone, for example, you buy a ticket at Las Vegas, they've now got a direct relationship with you, as they have if you've signed up for F1 Unlocked, or if you've, bought merchandise from them, or, whatever that may be. And that first party data that they're building up is going to become really formidable and has a big value of its own, of course. And that's a huge part of where they want to go. But there's another side to that, which is, I think, quite encouraging, where they actually want to have, as I say, a closer relationship with their fans, because then they can learn more. Part of the intention is not just to make more money out of you, because it's up to you how much money in the end you spend. But what they do want to understand is what you think. And then they'll be able to shape the sport more better for the future. And I think that's really interesting. And all of this was put in place really back in 2012 when they put the fiber optic ring around the circuit, and that began to replace the satellites. Previously Formula One, like all sports, was beamed around the world in real time by satellites. And nowadays it's a lot more of it is done through fiber optic pipe, which has very, very little delay, because then you start getting into some really cool stuff where you could actually have things going to and from the racetrack from the fans. So there's a whole other world to get into there.
I mean, there's things like at Miami, there was you could click a QR code on the big screen and have your face on the big screen and then wave at people. I see that interaction. I want to take some issue with you saying it's up to me how much I spend, because, Formula One, they got me outside the school gates and got me, hooked to Formula One. And now I have to pay, a big Sky subscription, and I can't not pay that because I'm completely addicted to Formula One. So in one way, it isn't up to me how much I spend. But the one criticism I'd still have with Formula One is, Greg in that interview talking a lot about sponsorships, over 300 sponsors, and the fan experience. We've got to get better access for people in Vegas, and there'll be people bands playing at the Sphere. I think Rene was talking about in a previous show. But the TV audience, me, as the little kid who was never going to get out to these things, I still feel like we're a little bit forgotten about. And like, the street circuits make it a less good TV experience, even though it's better for the people there.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's always a difficult balance to strike. And I think back in Bernie's day, he considered the audience to be the TV audience. That's the audience he cared about the most. So it was all about, how do I look after the ITVs or the Skies or whatever it may be of this world, who are paying a big rights fee in order to be part of this game. The people who actually came and paid their money at the racetrack, they were of secondary importance to him. With Liberty, it's a bit different. I think they really highly value the race going experience. They want it to be a really cool thing. I mean, when I say it's up to you how much you spend, I don't mean there's a completely free option for everybody. I mean, there is a completely free option, which is you consume the social, you watch the highlights on YouTube, et cetera, et cetera. You still get to consume Formula One. But, there are certain table stakes if you want to watch, in the same way as there's table stakes to actually get to a venue and watch the race live. And but I think what you're going to see in the future, and more actually in countries, it's happening already, is where you have a direct relationship with them, because you'll actually get everything coming through to you as a streaming option. So with probably a lower subscription than your Sky subscription costs in the UK, and you have a direct relationship with Formula One. So then you're getting all your races from them, you're getting your data if you want data, you're getting your practices if you want practice sessions, you're getting all kinds of other things as well. And I would imagine that a bit like a general admission ticket is cheaper than a grandstand ticket, there will be an affordable way in which you can live stream races going forward that will be like the general admission of Formula One. So all of these things are possible. And of course, you imagine how that will grow the fan base of the sport, again, another level.
Well, now I do feel a bit catered for. Good. Chris.
Yeah, feel catered for.
I agree. I think, particularly in this country, there is a hankering for F1 TV to be available in this country. And not because we don't like Sky, but I think because everyone's saying the F1 TV product is so dang good.
Yeah, the Americans keep rubbing it in our faces.
Exactly, right? So we want all of that, and then it's everything all in one handy-dandy little place, right? But what I'm curious about is, with Liberty now buying MotoGP as well, do you think there's going to be maybe like a two-way learning street from that? So F1 can learn from what they discover about MotoGP and implement that into Formula One, rather than just doing to MotoGP what they've done to Formula One already?
That's a really interesting question, and one I'm spending quite a lot of time thinking about. I know MotoGP world quite well. I've spent a bit of time there in the last few years. I've done a few projects with them. Interesting group of people, very Spanish, heavily Italian as well, not very American. They've got one American guy who kind of parachuted in about 18 months ago on the commercial side, called Dan Rossamunda, who came from the NBA. And you're right that they will start by doing a lot of the stuff they did with Formula One, because MotoGP have been quite restrictive on social media, things the riders can do around the track and blah, 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 all the same stuff that was controlled in Formula One. That's the first low-hanging fruit that they will address. But then it'll get quite interesting, because yes, they can to some extent bring some of the lessons, certainly to do with things like race promotion. MotoGP is a long way behind Formula One when it comes to race promotion. Obviously, the prices are a lot lower for everything in MotoGP. Knock a zero off everything: a sponsorship, a driver's salary, a ticket, everything. It's just a cheaper thing. They want to obviously build it into a big business. But first thing that I think they'll encounter is that actually, whisper it quietly, the racing product in MotoGP is a lot better than Formula One.
Oh, I don't want to hear. Oh, I get enough of this from Kyle and Jules. Come on.
It's so close and it's so on the edge. It's really a properly extreme sport, MotoGP. And whether you're actually at the racetrack or you're watching it on telly, and the way that they capture it now, they're really good at the broadcast stuff. They've got a really, really good team under a guy called Sergi over in Barcelona, who really knows his onions when it comes to, he's got something like 60 onboard cameras on the bikes, and they're literally about the size of my little finger. They're tiny. And so that's all good. But, the danger there is actually people might say, you know what, this MotoGP is actually better. It's more exciting than Formula One. I think I'll watch this now. I don't think that will happen, but some people might feel that way. But yeah, there's a whole bunch to do. They won't want to cannibalize each of the two products. And the EU, who will have to give the yay or nay to this actually going through, we'll have to say, here's a whole bunch of rules of what you can and can't do when it comes to bundling rights and all these other things which they would consider to be anti-competitive. Because if you remember back when CVC bought Formula One back in the early 2000s, they owned MotoGP at the time, and the EU said, no, you can't own both. You have to get rid of one of MotoGP if you're going to buy Formula One, which they did. And so it's up to Liberty to persuade the EU that the world has changed a lot when it comes to that kind of thing. And here's a whole load of things, that anti-competitive practices that we won't do. But, if it goes through, you'll see some cool things. Like I could imagine not having MotoGP and Formula One necessarily at the same time, but certainly having them on, for example, consecutive weekends, or you could do all kinds of cool things, maybe where you could have one event downtown and the other thing coming up on the circuit nearby, or all sorts of stuff like that. So there's all sorts of possibilities. And most of the tracks that MotoGP races on, a lot of the tracks MotoGP races on, Formula One goes to too. Obviously, you can't race bikes on street circuits because that would be fatal. But another big one, for example, is Drive to Survive. I can't believe we've got, 25 minutes into this interview and you haven't asked me about Drive to Survive yet. That's really good, by the way. But Formula One, as part of the reason that of the explosion of success of Formula One, clearly is Drive to Survive. I believe it's not the only reason. I believe it was only the spark, but actually it's because of all the work they've done in advance with the teams and the social media and all the things we talked about before, that therefore when people discovered Formula One through Drive to Survive, they found this whole world. Like they went through the back of a wardrobe and found this amazing world that they knew nothing about. And here's all these cool drivers and these cool teams and these amazing locations, and they could access all of that stuff. That's because of the preparatory work that had been done by Liberty and Formula One before Drive to Survive. And they just were really lucky with the pandemic and then a world championship fight for the ages in 2021 between Verstappen and Hamilton. There's this perfect storm of things that all went right for Formula One at that time, and that's what's exploded the sport. MotoGP hasn't had that lift-off moment yet. They did a version of Drive to Survive, which I think was on Amazon, but it didn't work. Linguistically, it was all over the place, and they just didn't pull it off. So I don't know if they'll try and do something similar, or whether that would just be a bit too obvious. But it'll be interesting to see what they do as that sort of real lift-off thing that just takes them to that, it explodes it, takes it to bigger audiences.
I must admit, MotoGP is becoming a bit of a problem in our world. This is a little bit inside Missed Apex, but Chris, you and Christine are doing a great job on the Formula E pod. The numbers, you're losing out. The MotoGP pod, led by Kyle and Jules there, is beating the Formula E pod at the moment. That's a recent development.
Doesn't surprise me.
It could be down to your presenting, or it could be down to the sports. I don't know. We'll see which way. I couldn't tell whether the not talking about Netflix was serious or not. Is it because everybody, goes straight to Drive to Survive and gives that all the credit?
I think a lot of people do. Yeah. And there's no question that I constantly encounter people who are quote unquote new F1 fans, and I say to them, how did you discover the sport? And 9 times out of 10 they say, Drive to Survive.
That was going to be my comment, which is I think that maybe is not getting enough credit for the amount it came about. But I have friends who are Drive to Survive fans only, and they almost don't watch the races, but they will not miss Drive to Survive, which I think. And
it's interesting, Richard, because there's a kind of snobbishness actually within the sport as well.
Hugely. Yeah.
So I'm not typical in that sense, because I watch Drive to Survive, and of course I know these people. I mean, I've known Lewis Hamilton since he was 12 years old, and I know Toto Wolff, and I know Christian Horner, and again I've known Christian since before he came into Formula One, and I know the situations that these behind the scenes conversations and moments happen in, but I don't always know, because you're not in the room. I don't always know what actually happened on XYZ weekend behind the scenes. So for me, when I watch it, I see context. I've got the context. I know the context, but then I see the detail that was missing for me that puts the picture together, and it helps me understand other things that I was thinking, okay, that makes sense. And that's why this, that, and the other, or whatever. So for me, it's a real picture filling out exercise. And I think it's a mistake to be snobbish about it. I think it's I think it's crazy to do that.
So I'm the same as you in that I don't have any snobbishness to Drive to Survive. I do the ringer with Meg Schuster, where we're talking to 99% Drive to Survive fans. And I said to them 3 years ago, do you know what? Within a year, you'll know 95% as much as the real fans or the old. So I think that time has truly gone. That ship has truly sailed. But we have some interesting characters and voices in your background at the moment, James. And I can't let you go without asking, where are you? Because it looks absolutely beautiful behind you.
Yeah, so I'm in Maranello. I'm about 500 yards from the Ferrari factory. And that's because I was doing an interview with Fred Vasseur this morning, which is going to be on this week's Jay on F1 podcast.
Ah, there we go. An extra plug for James Allen on F1 podcast. Can you give us a tease? What spirits is Fred in? Fighting form?
Yeah, he's on very good form, actually. I think it's a really interesting moment for him because he's now kind of a year and a half into being the boss of the Ferrari Formula One team. And he's obviously had a huge success in terms of bringing Lewis Hamilton in for next year. Everyone's wanting to know now whether he's going to bring Adrian Newey in. Obviously, he's not giving anything away on that, but a lot of people in Formula One seem to think that he is going to bring in Adrian Newey. So that'll be quite interesting. But also, he's now won 3 Grand Prix up to this point, and you can sort of see the confidence building within the team. And so a lot of what I'm talking to him about is that confidence. You know, I've observed over 30 plus years, it's a fragile thing in Formula One, the confidence. And it can ease, in this team particularly, it can very easily kind of get away from them because they've got so much pressure on them, so much attention from the Italian media, all of those kind of things. So it's something that you have to be very careful of. And obviously, Jean Todt, when he ran Ferrari, was very, very good at managing those kind of things. He was like a protective umbrella over the team and let them get on with their work underneath him, protecting them from the media, from the interference from the bosses, etc. And so Fred seems to me to be doing all of that sort of stuff. And he's on good form.
I've just got this sneaky feeling that they're going to come out with something consistent this season that's going to get them winning races. And I don't think it's over. One of the main factors might be whether Leclerc can put a run together, because when he's high, when he's got confidence, he seems formidable. But then every now and then you go, we talk about the Leclerc curse and these things seem to build up on him. So is there going to be a moment where he snaps in his head and he believes that he can be a champion?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think he's going to, it's all about motivation. It's all about competition. So, I think he's got the competition he's got at the moment. Obviously, it's going to escalate next year. And it'll be very, very interesting to see the dynamic between them, because on the one hand, Leclerc is obviously younger. He's in his peak years. He's very, very fast. But also he's extremely well embedded in the team. His manager is Nicolas Todt, who's Jean Todt's son. And although Jean Todt doesn't run Ferrari anymore, clearly they know their way around the team and they know all the political avenues and alleyways and then how Ferrari works. And Hamilton hasn't driven for a non-English language Formula One team. He's driven for Fred Vasseur, funnily enough, when he was running Formula 2 and Formula 3. Yeah, exactly. In a French team, but still, it's not quite the same thing. This is a very, very complicated team, which has very much its own way of doing things. And it'll be really interesting to see how Fred Vasseur helps Lewis to assimilate into that group to get the best out of him, and also how Leclerc handles it. And what happens when they've both got a chance of winning, particularly if you get towards the end of a championship when they've both got a chance of winning.
Oh, it's going to be fun. And I really like Leclerc as well. So if Hamilton does end up getting beaten at the end of his career, it's a decent consolation prize. So how does it work for you there? They just go, hey, James, Fred's in the mood to chat. Go and pop along to Maranello.
No, you obviously have to put a request in and all that kind of thing. And then we plan these things, quite some way ahead. And this was the date chosen. So it's good. And I had a few other things to do while I'm here. So all good.
Excellent. I'm really excited you've got this podcast up and running. And who did you say was coming up next? You've got Fred on there as your next interview. And these are real big heavy hitters. I'm disappointed how good this podcast is that we're promoting. James Allen on F1, and it looks like it's going from strength to strength. Obviously, you can't interview Fred Vasseur every week, but I'm sure you've got some great people lined up.
Yeah, we've got some great people lined up. People that everybody's heard of, and a few people that you haven't necessarily heard of, like we had with René Wilman, the CEO of Las Vegas Grand Prix. It's all about people that shape the sport, and we also have myself, alongside myself, we have one of our top writers like a Ben Hunter or a Rebecca Clancy or a John Noble analysing what they say, and as long as someone from the outside. So hopefully it gives a lot of insight to people as well as just an interview. It's not purely an interview podcast. There's a lot more to it than that. We've got some interesting names coming up for sure.
I'm curious, James, because obviously you mentioned Ben Hunt, Rebecca Clancy during the year. Do journalists get as excited about the transfer market year on year between websites as we do about drivers?
No, not really. No, it was, but they are. You're right. It's great to have them on board. They come from a tremendous, discipline and working in Fleet Street and the news desks and what have you. And next year is a really important year for Autosport because it's the 75th anniversary. Autosport was born in the same summer as Formula One itself. The summer of 1950, the first ever Grand Prix was held at Silverstone in the early summer of 1950, and the first edition of Autosport came out that summer as well. So we've got something in common with them there. So it's a really, really important year. And so to have them leadership like that from Rebecca is absolutely fantastic. And we're all really looking forward to seeing what she makes of it.
You say that no one's heard of Renee Wilm, but when we were in Miami, I don't know if I've mentioned I was in Miami, Chris, but I was in Miami, and I said, "Oh, who's that?" I
don't know if I've ever mentioned that I did the commentary at the London E-Prix.
But I said, who's that lady? And then someone whispered, "Yeah, that's like the most powerful woman in Formula One. I suggest you pay attention." So these are people that we should know, and because of your new pod, we'll be able to. So go and click the show notes below and check out James Allen's new podcast. James, thank you so much for your time, and I hope we can, bully you back into coming to the shed again.
It's a pleasure. Thanks so much for inviting me on. And look forward to seeing you again soon.
Big Dirty News. Look at us, Chris, interviewing James Allen. Who'd have thought, eh? Not me.
I know, right? Our humble little shed production, bringing in the voice of Formula One for many a year, for a generation.
Yeah, he was definitely the voice of Formula One in my 20s, which is I would say my F1 dark years, because the Schumacher phenomenon was kind of ruining F1. I think now, thinking about it, I thought the Verstappen had the potential to be worse than the Schumacher dominance, but I don't think so. I think the Schumacher dominance is way ahead still.
I don't know. I feel like there's more to talk about now than probably there was.
Oh yeah, there was nothing to talk
back
about
then.
But it was a much shorter season, so it was a much lower footprint. 16 races a season.
I think that's the impact that's worse, isn't it? It's the fact that Formula One's on every week, and every week it's the same thing, right? So you can get bored of that very, very quickly. What I will say is that, like with Verstappen and Lewis had some close years as well. People talk about the Ferrari dominance as if every single day for 5 years Schumacher rocked up, drove the wheels off the thing, took home the trophy, and then 2 weeks later just did it again. Whereas people forget that in 2000, it was a big title fight with Mika Hakkinen, and then he had a big title fight with Montoya and who else was in it? With Raikkonen as well.
I'm about to counter this so hard. Okay, 2002 Australian Grand Prix. Schumacher.
I know the 2002 was the low year. I'll admit that, but it was followed up by 2003, which was brilliant.
Well, why don't I just read out the winners in order from the 2002 season? Australia, Schumacher. Malaysia, Schumacher. Brazil, Schumacher. San Marino, Schumacher. Spain, Schumacher. Austria, Schumacher. Monaco, Coulthard. Schumacher, Barrichello, Schumacher, Barrichello, Schumacher. Oh, mate, that was horrible. And the thing is, it was the manner of those victories as well. I think it was worse than Verstappen last year.
Well, I could equally read out last year's winners.
That's true. As soon as you said that, I went, "Oh no, that's a really good counter." And it's a longer list as well, isn't it?
Exactly. And there was one non-Red Bull win.
And I think the difference, though, is I don't think people minded as much. Like you said, we had less opportunity to be bored by it, and it was from a time where people had more patience in general, and in a European landscape, in a British landscape certainly, where people didn't mind boring sports as much. Yeah, so I won't describe Test cricket to people who are not familiar with it, but it's 5 days and it's often a draw. Now the demand for entertainment is much, much higher. I've used this analogy before, but E.T. would not do well in cinemas now. It is dull. I liked it at the time. Now it's dull. So
I have a similar analogy, Spanners, which is what many people will regard as the best superhero or one of the best superhero movies, which is Spider-Man 2, the Sam Raimi one, right? And that's got no Spider-Man set piece in it for like 45 minutes. Marvel would never, ever consider that now.
Yeah. So now in this environment, I think Liberty Media initially, I think if they'd have realized the effect of Verstappen winning on their interest in general and numbers, you've got to look at the amount of podcasts, YouTubers, influencers that have moved away to another shiny thing to say, yes, the Verstappen dominance definitely had an impact. And then I think Liberty were caught out by that a little bit. Like they didn't think it would have that much of an impact. And then they tried with the line for a while saying, actually, it's good. Do you remember this was last year? They were going, actually, it's really good to see this level of dominance because it doesn't happen very often. So you just need to enjoy the fact that someone's setting all these records.
I would argue it's the other way around. Maybe this level of dominance, yeah, okay, that doesn't happen very often. But that makes it sound like every other year was 2021, you know? And it just, they're not. Every year, it is very likely you will have one fastest car and more often than not, one fastest driver in that team as well. So yes, one person might win 90% of all the races, and every now and again they'll muck it up and you'll get somebody else winning. But that is 99% of Formula One. And I remember us trying to really, really hammer it into the new listeners we got in 2021 saying, guys,
it's not always
like this. You have to prepare yourself for disappointment next year.
I was trying to teach my kids a lesson on the penny pushes. So we love the 2 penny pushes. And you can kind of spend a couple of quid and it doesn't matter too much. You know, at the arcade.
The arcade.
The penny falls.
Machine.
Yeah. And they were desperate to go and try, this is years ago, to try the 10p ones. 10 pence, and it's much shinier, isn't it? And so
expensive though.
Yeah, but I was like, okay, we're going to take a couple of quid. I'm going to teach them the lesson that it's a very quick way to lose money. And we dropped like 4 quid straight away. I was like, no, you're learning the wrong lesson. But it's that similar thing where you kind of go, it's not always going to be like this, I promise. But 2021 was a big shiny cherry, an instant reward for F1 fans that just dropped in. And they hadn't even earned the pain of the Schumacher years if I could be allowed a little gatekeeping.
I mean, in fairness, when I started watching in 2010, and I was a bit of a late bloomer with Formula One because I didn't start watching it.
Oh, wow. Yeah, you got 2010 and then 2012 in quick succession afterwards.
2010, best title fight there's ever been in Formula One history, full stop. And then the brilliant racing of 2011, like, yes, Vettel walked away with the title, but it was the introduction of Pirelli tyres, KERS, DRS. The races were amazing. And then, 2012, a mad year, absolutely bonkers year. So having all that in pretty quick succession, I was very spoiled.
Oh, yeah. And then even 2013, it started off up in the air.
Really well.
Yeah. So I won loads of money on tennis. It was a weird time, but I'm really good at gambling on tennis.
It was a weird time,
but it takes a long time. But yeah, I got obsessed with it, and I put all the winnings I got from it because I was like, this is too time consuming. On Hamilton taking that 2013 title, which
that's a big risk in his first year with Mercedes.
Yeah, but right, if you look back, it wasn't that crazy. And then at the start of the season, it actually looked decent. And that seems stupid now because of the runaway of Vettel at the end. But they changed the tyre compounds after Silverstone, and that flipped the championship back on its head.
It 100% did. And don't get me wrong, 2013 was the year kind of Mercedes finally arrived. But we're forgetting that they chewed their tyres for the first, third of that season, where they would lock out the front row of the grid because they had the fastest car in qualifying, and then by lap 5 they'd be 17th and 18th because they melted through the tires.
Yeah, I know. So they were able to win Monaco because they just parked the bus completely. Because and that's another example of, that was up there with Ricciardo's only having one engine cylinder left and then still winning Monaco, basically. And Hamilton was set to win that, wasn't he? And then he had a bad pit stop.
No, that was 2015.
That was 2015.
That was later. I remember Mark Webber doing a similar thing in 2012 because Vettel had a poor qualifying. And so they told Mark, just back up the pack so that Seb can do his pit stop and jump everyone, basically. Yeah. And I think he ended up getting up to 4th or something.
But later in that season, they did win that Silverstone race, the tire explosion race.
But with Nico, and because I remember this. So Lewis was leading, and then he had a puncture. A couple other cars had a puncture. Vettel was leading, and then his gearbox broke.
Yeah, I remember.
And then Nico took the.
Can you believe everyone around me was booing in the stands except me? I couldn't believe it. I was just looking around, tutting at everyone, booing Vettel's gearbox failure on the straight. The worst possible place he could break down. I think Hamilton did win a race that year, though.
He did. He won in Hungary that year.
All I'm saying is it didn't feel like a mad bet at the time. It felt like there was something brewing, and all those pole positions were coming up, and you just go, if they can just unlock that thing and to hold on to some race pace. And remember, we were all new to Pirelli tyres back then as well. So maybe it was a bit of naivety that you could just suddenly turn it from a car with no tyre life into, a race sustaining car. But certainly then after Belgium, it was Vettel winning something like, I'm just counting now, 9 in a row, and by a long way. So every single time he'd just go, right, 20-second gap, earn my pit stop, and then sit there. So, but even that season had good racing behind it. So you're early.
Yeah.
I remember where this conversation started, but right now we're talking about your early fan experience. You got treated to really, really good seasons of Formula One almost immediately. So then that led to all the Rosberg Hamilton battles, which were pretty dramatic. Yes, we'd have preferred the pack to be closer, but that was a battle every single weekend, Hamilton versus Rosberg.
Yeah, there was some highs and lows in that one. I remember 2015 being my first really disappointing year in F1.
Yeah.
And I got to the end of it and I thought, I don't remember what happened in any of it.
Because Hamilton really kind of just pulled away. 2015, 2016, as mad as it sounds, the gulf between Hamilton and Rosberg on race pace lengthened.
Was bigger.
Yeah.
Was definitely bigger. Yeah, for sure. But then, we had 2017, 2018, the bout for, 5 world titles between Seb and Lewis. And after that, it did start to get a little bit less.
I think that one of the most normal types of season is like a Hamilton 19, Hamilton 20, and this Vettel 2013, where there's a bit of competition at the front, and then one team kind of stretches its legs and pulls away. So if you got 2009, where an unexpected team got that breakaway, but really, if it wasn't for that really low percentage advantage that they had, the chances of that kind of advantage are, nuts. That could have been a Sebastian Vettel a season where, it looks a bit interesting with the bronze at the start, but then he wraps it up by Mexico. That's the more normal scenario for a season. Bit interesting at the start, one team pulls ahead, stays ahead.
I really couldn't believe when Lewis won the 2018 title in Mexico with 3 races still to go, when you consider how close, even a handful of races prior, they were, or Seb was ahead of him on points, just a few races prior. And I think that speaks more to the down spiral of Ferrari and more so Sebastian Vettel than the team or the car.
Why didn't he just pick up the finishing board markers like he did at Canada and just swap them around? And that gets translated.
Because I tell you what, unlike Canada, there was no argument for a lot of those ones in 2018, sadly.
So you came in to the sport with some great seasons, and then you probably could go 50-50 for a long time, great season, not so great season, not so great. And then so the newer fans that came in for 21, they had 2022, which is actually a bit more of a normal season. So it was a bit of doubt at first.
Start.
Yeah, and everyone was saying, it's going to get boring because Ferrari are just going to run away with this. It's going to be stupid. And then the Verstappen dominance kicked in.
I'd argue it was the other way around.
No, people were saying that Leclerc was going to run away with it. I promise.
Maybe in testing.
No, during the season. I swear to you, during the season, people were saying he was going to run away with it.
I would have vehemently disagreed with whoever was saying that at the time, because we knew that the Red Bull was still way overweight. And one of the reasons Ferrari was so fast at the start of the year was because it was one of 2 cars that actually met the weight limit.
And also, the races where they didn't have a mechanical issue, they were still winning anyway, Red Bull.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
I'm just telling you, people were saying that. I'm not inventing that. I'm not inventing.
I'm not saying you did, but it was very clear that the Red Bull had so much more potential, and yet it was still fighting for race wins. So, I would have always expected Max to.
So really, the new fans who were then disappointed after 2021, you've only really had to endure the back half of 22 and 23. So that's nothing. Yeah. It's only a year and a half, and then the beginning of this season, and now things are looking interesting again. That's not so bad. I just want to talk to you guys in 90s F1. That's all, because if you could go back to 90s F1 now, you watch the highlights, maybe watch the odd race for the experience of it. But it's nothing like as good as the sport that we've got now in your era of watching F1, Chris.
You used to get no pit stops for some drivers. In the days where you didn't have to refuel and there was no mandatory tire swap, you would get people who would just, right, that's it. I'm going, and I'm not going to stop.
Yeah,
until the end.
So my bad period, which is why we started talking about this, and also I'm in my 20s where I've got interesting things happening in my life, which I don't now, because I was, I was young and magnificent. Out on the town I was.
Paint the picture for us, Spanners, because this is pre Mrs. Spanners.
Oh, yeah, just about. In fact, yeah.
Yeah, pre Mrs. Spanners. You're in your prime. You weren't serving?
Yes, I was a uniformed soldier, and my time when not busy would be spent, having fun.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, like so we were in the 20s.
More interesting things going on in your life than what was happening in Formula One.
Weekends for Sunday, it was definitely a nap sport. So I would catch the F1, but I would often fall asleep.
Yeah.
So, but that's because some of those championships were really, dull as well. But I looked back before James came on, and I was looking up James Allen, F1 commentary, and it just didn't click in my head that that's the voice of F1 from that period, watching it on ITV. And I was like, oh, because I primarily, from what he's doing now, interviews as a journalist. And I was like, oh, of course, he's that voice of F1.
It's so mad to think about how many iconic moments that he got to call during his time on ITV, for that reason.
But I was already excited when it's like James Allen journo, and I don't know why it was such a break. As soon as I started playing those clips, I went, oh my God. But this is like 25 years ago, going back now. We actually, I don't know how we got on those tangents.
We actually had a topic we were going to talk about.
Well, if I press the bumper, that'll get us onto the news, won't it?
Okay.
Big Dirty News.
And that's what the midweek's for, Chris. They only tuned in because I had a clickbaity headline on the show. What should we call the show? Something like, what did he say? Anything controversial?
Oh God!
Liberty to cater to stadium fans, says James Allen. I'll find something.
F1 wants to link with you.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, F1 harvesting your personal data, says James Allen on Missed Apex podcast. That's what we've got. And
then don't give certain websites any ideas, Spanners.
There'll be a thumbnail of James Allen and then an arrow to something that's like your personal
being
data.
Circled.
Yeah, being circled and stolen, like with a thief with a bag. Anyway.
Yeah, it'll be like the swag bag with the $sign on it. Yeah.
Movie news. There's a movie. I hate movie production because it always takes so long and they get you excited. They announce, there's going to be an F1 movie. They have Brad Pitt turn up at the track and then you have to wait 2 years. So this is slated for June 25, this Brad Pitt Untitled project. What's it called?
Oh God, I can't remember.
Oh, no.
You know what I should have done is looked up the name of it before. Isn't it called Drive or something like that? But it's the Apple TV production that is being produced by Lewis Hamilton and starring Brad Pitt. If you remember, you probably saw the cars out at certain Grand Prix last year being filmed on the track as part of the Grand Prix. So they had them about on the formation laps and things like that. They recently did a controlled crash at Silverstone as well. And they've done some various other bits of filming where they got a real car, a real, Formula One-esque car. I think it's a Formula 2 chassis with some with some Mercedes bits on it. It's definitely got a Mercedes engine in it. And my favorite fact about the car as well is it's got real sponsors on it. Like,
oh, nice.
They went to a brand and said, sponsor this fake car that's going to be in a movie about Formula One. And they have actually sold ad spacing on a fake car.
I love that.
It's really cool.
Oh, I think I was right, by the way. It's untitled. So it's
untitled.
It's listed as untitled Joseph Kosinski film.
Okay, because they've never actually like referred to it, have they? It's always been the Brad Pitt, the Apple TV, the Lewis Hamilton movie. But yeah, it's coming out, and I would like to think that because someone like Lewis Hamilton is involved in it, that they will resist the urge to do the classic shift down, foot down shot, which if you see that in a movie, we will all roll our eyes and groan, because that's not how racing works.
If they do a movie that is just set at, oh, we must appease Formula One fans who understand the sport, that's not mass appeal. They have to make things exciting for people who know nothing about Formula One.
And that's fine, but don't put things in there that are patently false, which that is.
You seen the Gran Turismo movie?
No, do you know what? I've kind of been saving it.
Yeah,
because I know
you can all come over to my
together.
house. So
I've been saving it.
I think it's a good movie. I'll just give you one example because it's near the start of the film. It's a good movie. It's well acted. And if you wanted to introduce that world of sim racing to GT racing to an audience that doesn't know about motorsport, I think they actually got so much of it right. But for us, it is going to be maddening. Okay, so he enters the big competition to then start this whole journey. Yeah, and he's late he's late. Isn't he? He's late because he's in all sorts of trouble. He's got to run through.
Why is he late?
Because he's in trouble with the police. So he's got to...
Why is he in trouble with the police?
Because he's dragging himself up from this background and he's having to, go for it. And he's got all this adversity and his dad doesn't understand. But spoiler, the dad does understand eventually, so it's okay. And then, so he's running through the streets, gets to the sim rig, and I think the race has already started. But he jumps in, and now remembering this is meant to be like the best sim racers in the world, he then manages to go from the back of the grid with everybody having started, and then overtakes the whole grid kind of one by one. Yeah, exactly. This is like the best drivers in this competition, and it's like a Xbox lobby with everybody on amateur. So if you've done any sim racing, you'll look at that and it would be maddening. But if you don't know, then yeah, look, he's overtaking people. It's fun. So that's what they've got aim for, Chris.
I'd love to know how many seconds a lap quicker is he supposed to be lapping?
Yeah. So it's basically you'd have to be. I think I worked it out at the time, and you'd have to be like 4 or 5 seconds a lap faster to do what he was doing in that film. And obviously, you'd never get that pace. You'd have to be superhuman.
Between the best and the worst, I could expect that, but there's no way he's winning.
In the top level, no, there's going to be a second between people. Tops.
I don't know.
Sim. Right. Anyway, but we definitely have to watch that because the whole movie is full of things like that work fine on cinema, but will drive us mad. And I've got a feeling the Brad Pitt movie is going to be the same.
Maybe, but for me, these are more about the characters and the development of the characters and the more emotional aspect of it.
Well, 100% at some point they're going to be on a straight and then they're going to downshift, press the pedal harder, and then accelerate past them.
My one gripe in these movies, because it's like, why isn't he going flat out? I'm actually kind of looking forward to seeing that movie.
Did we actually have any news on it? Or like, why is there? Why are we talking
the
about
release date, July 2025. Right. Is that what it was? July? Yeah, July 25.
It's really well June. It's June 2025.
Oh, dang it. Okay, yeah, June.
All right. Well, we've got time to plan for it. So let's see if we can't do a Missed Apex screening somewhere.
And Apple TV, they're still in time to invite us to the premiere.
Yep. I got for Gran Turismo. I got invited to the Journo screenings.
Yeah, the press. Cool. Yeah, the press screening. Yeah.
It was really cool. And at the office, I can't remember the company. Was it Sony? I can't remember the.
No, it would have been because because Sony Games are making 3 movies about 3 of their games, and I think the first one was Gran Turismo. I can't remember what the other 2 are.
I know my hearing works, so I handed over my details, and they were like, "Oh, who are you with on Missed Apex podcast?" I went, "Oh, okay." Give me a funny look. Went and checked, and sure enough, then they gave me the pass, And as I walked off, not enough out of earshot, they went, podcast? Like that. And I went, oh no. Anyway, what else have we got lined up for Formula One news, Chris?
Alpine.
Yeah, well, me and Joe, I think I accidentally broke this on Missed Apex. So Joe had mentioned it in his JSBM newsletter, which is available to buy. Anyone can buy it, but it's more of an industry publication and priced as such. But Joe is very kind and he sends it to me. So I just brought it up on the show, and I'm not sure whether I made him accidentally leak that when he didn't want to. But it's been widely reported now, obviously we were talking about it on Friday, that Alpine, which, let's be honest, is Renault, are going to be looking for an engine to be a customer for an engine. And so, interesting. Potentially, yeah. But even the thought of it, Chris, the thought of Renault running with Red Bull powertrains or Mercedes is crazy. And so, as I often like to do, picked a fight with F1 Statman on Twitter, Sean Kelly, great guy, go and follow him. But Sean was going fully to bat about saying it's perfectly reasonable. It's no big deal. Some of the arguments were, well, Aston Martin have a Mercedes engine. Lotus weren't running with it was Enstone, but Lotus were running with a Mercedes engine. But I don't feel like, I don't know. Is that the same?
I don't think it is necessarily. I mean, like the Aston Martin thing, Aston Martin don't make their own engines on the road, so they're not going to build them in Formula One. I do think it's a bit left field for them to be running Hondas in Formula One in the next couple of years, considering that Mercedes is their sort of primary supplier for the road car engines. But maybe that's going to change, or maybe there was some news about that I missed. Hard to keep on top of everything these days. But when it was Lotus, it hadn't been the Renault works team. The Enstone team, if you go back far enough, is, Fernando Alonso's championship-winning Renault works team. Then it wasn't for a little bit, and it went under a few different names and a few different, owners. And then Renault reinvested in it in, 2016 or something. And they came back. They brought the Renault name back and said, this is the Renault works team. And it is still a Renault works team, despite being called Alpine, because Alpine is their sort of sporting brand, right? In the same way that you have different like the Cupra, for example, and that was part of Seat, and it ended up becoming its own brand altogether, for example. But you see it in lots of different manufacturers on the road, and so. Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly that the idea of Alpine not having a Renault engine or not having its own supply is pretty ridiculous. And it speaks volumes to Renault's commitment to F1, which we already know.
Yeah, which I've always questioned.
Pretty
I've always
low.
questioned it.
What they've said, the boss of Renault has no interest in Formula One. He does it because it's good marketing, because the people on his team have convinced him it's a good idea. He doesn't care about Formula One, and I'm sure they will try and distance themselves. We're talking about Renault, the group, rather than the F1 team, obviously. And I think that we could talk about Renault or Alpine being involved in other series. So take the World Endurance Championship, for example. They've just finished their first Le Mans. Well, they didn't finish their first Le Mans, double DNF.
And how bad was that Alpine have two engine failures? I mean, it's so on point.
Yes, but do you know what that engine is? It's a Formula 2 engine with the spec hybrid components on it. So it's a Mechachrome engine, famed for their reliability. And it's not an Alpine engine, or it's not a Renault engine. They haven't done anything. I don't think it's good optics for Alpine to not be running a Renault engine. For them to be running a rival engine, for them to be running a Mercedes engine, it's embarrassing. For them to be running a Red Bull powertrains engine, it's kind of ironic because it was Red Bull Renault that was the kings.
That's the one I've got the biggest issue with. Right, even if Red Bull were considering supplying that works team with one of their engines, they turned around a couple of months back and said if Andretti don't bring in their own engine, or if GM don't bring in their own engine, what value have they got? Come and speak to us when you've got your own engine. But then you're going to endorse supplying a customer team that is already a works team. And you just go, that is... I know Red Bull powertrains haven't officially said anything, but the fact that it seemed to be a positive conversation that may or may not have happened, you go, there's no way you can say no to Andretti because they don't bring their own engine, but then be happy to endorse Alpine with a customer engine.
And it's not necessarily you have to build your own engine and chassis to be considered a works team. I mean, before Mercedes bought the Brawn GP team for the 2010 season, you would have considered McLaren the de facto Mercedes works team because they were getting factory support from Mercedes in terms of their engine supply before Mercedes came on as a fully fledged team, and that sort of diluted a little bit. So yeah, the term sort of works team, manufacturer team, it is a grey area in the same way that Sauber is now going to be an Audi works team. Even if, you know, it's not going to run under the name Sauber.
Yeah. Are we talking 2026 for all of this?
Right. Would be, yes, probably.
Okay. So what does this tell us? This tells us that they've obviously been having a long look at what they've got for 2026. They haven't not done anything. They must have started trying to build these engines now, as everyone has been. So Mercedes are super optimistic, going, yep, there's a buzz. We're feeling really good about our 2026 engine, except the flaw I can see in that is that you already have the same engine as McLaren. And so even with an engine advantage, you're going to have to beat McLaren, and that's not a guarantee. And secondly, that Renault must have looked at their effort and gone, nope, we don't have this. We don't got it.
It's more, so obviously they had a pretty torrid start to the turbo hybrid era. I mean, in the V8 era, they probably had the best engine, the best overall package. Maybe not so much in terms of horsepower, but the best overall package. They were very, very much up there. But since the turbo hybrid era has begun, they've been on the back foot. It has been consistently well behind, not just on power, but probably on fuel efficiency, or energy efficiency as well. We should probably call it, because they're one and the same these days. So I would say that they're scared about that happening again, about spending a lot of money on, you know, what is a very
they're not, Chris. This is the main problem. They're not spending a lot of money. Yeah. They're spending less than half of what they could have been spending. So I think this is it. They've underinvested, and then they've looked at it and gone, actually, do you know what? Do you know what? Maybe it's time to fully cut our losses and just go. But can you imagine a car lining up on the grid called Alpine Mercedes, which is probably the most likely option?
Yeah, it's ludicrous, isn't it?
It's definitely a weird one. So I'll stick to my original theory that along with Briatore coming in means that although they're saying it's not for sale, something is going on in the background at Alpine.
But there's all sorts of rules and regulations about, you know, if Alpine isn't stuck with an engine, if they're stuck without an engine, then there's all sorts of there's a literal formula to work out how many teams each manufacturer should supply based on the number of teams on the grid and the number of manufacturers available. And then if somebody is stuck without an engine, who has the least supply and should therefore offer up to do it. But then new manufacturers aren't asked to do that. So Audi, for example, won't be asked to supply Alpine an engine. No, Red Bull counts as a it's not a new one because they're already established.
Oh, I lose track. I honestly lose track of whether Honda, Red Bull, Ford powertrain. It's not a Red Bull powertrain Ford now, though, is it?
No, but it's a Red Bull powertrain. It doesn't matter what badge you stick on the end of it. It's a Red Bull powertrain. So and I don't think Honda could be asked to do it because they have supplied engines in this.
So Honda isn't counted as a new engine either.
I don't think so.
So hang on a minute. So that Red Bull powertrain simultaneously counts as Red Bull powertrain being an extant entity. It contributes to Honda being considered an extant entity, and Ford will de facto be an extant entity as well. What? I honestly feel like somebody has just. I'm being asked to believe the unbelievable constantly when it comes to what that engine is.
I think if they have no engine deal, then Honda would be the first ones to be asked to, you have to supply that, because there is an agreement. There is a rule that says if a team is stuck without an engine, you have to supply. We have to make sure that they are supplied with an engine. Mercedes has obviously got a free spot now because of Aston Martin switching over to Honda power units for 2026, so they've lost the supply. So they're only doing, as it stands, 2 customers.
So if you look at the teams, Mercedes are confident. That's fine. I have reasonable confidence that Honda can turn up and make a good engine now.
Yes.
Yeah, who'd have thought we'd
Ferrari.
be saying that? If you go back to 2015 when they were lost.
Yeah, but that's because they were with McLaren, who gave them just zero leeway on.
Well, zero is the key word, wasn't it? Because it was the zero. It was the zero size zero philosophy, wasn't it?
Size zero.
And so the reports at the time were then that restricted Honda's ability to do things.
Zero leeway on giving Honda anything that they needed from the chassis to be able to do it. And also, even if there was a problem with the car that was not Honda related, they would just say it was a Honda issue.
Right.
So just sweep their own issues under the rug.
But what's funny is newer listeners might not remember, Fernando Alonso on the team radio was savage about the Honda engine and was calling it a GP2 engine in a clip that's been played over and over again. And of course, it will be Alonso driving an Aston Martin Honda.
Well, we don't know.
Oh, he's not retiring. He can't. He doesn't know how.
This is true. The other ones I liked from Alonso were the engine feels good, much slower than before.
Oh yeah. These are worth looking up, by the way. Yeah.
Yeah, and then what was the other one? We have no pace. We're out of the points. I have no fuel, and all that blah blah blah. So
the reputational damage. I do wonder how much they take that into account. So Pirelli took a beating with reputational damage, with tires exploding and not lasting very long, and then Honda took a battering as well. But I think that's largely gone now. If you think Honda, you think of a fast Formula One engine, and so if you had Alpine Honda and Aston Martin Honda or whatever Alpine become, I think that's we're looking pretty good there. And let's back Red Bull powertrains because they're a good organisation. Maybe we don't have the same kind of 2014 disparity that we had before. I know there's been problems with the Red Bull powertrain, they've said.
Yes, so it is new.
What about
because I know they're currently, Red Bull powertrains is a current power unit, but what we need to take into consideration is the fact that they didn't design it, they didn't really build it either. They basically took the Honda IP, got an engine freeze, and all they have to do is sort of maintain them. Now, reality is not quite as simplistic as that, but what we're talking about with 26 is their first actual built engine, and doing it with Ford's help, of course. But the rumor mill is that they haven't quite got it right just yet, or they are significantly behind the other manufacturers. And so, maybe they won't. Maybe they haven't quite got it right, and we'll be looking at Mercedes and Ferrari perhaps for the top manufacturers in 2026.
I'm going to wrap it up there because we only really jumped on to speak to James Allen, and then we just got off on one. So.
We really did.
Fair enough. I
haven't eaten lunch, so I'd quite like to do that.
I mean, we're constantly evolving the format of what we want for these midweek shows, but basically it's if we can chat to somebody interesting or there's interesting news to speak about, then we'll jump on and do that. And so at least we front loaded the good bit. We put the James Allen bit at the front. So refer to the link in the show notes below and rewatch the intro if you want to know details of how to come to our live show on July the 6th in Milton Keynes.
If we were a TikTok channel, and even though we do have a TikTok at Mr. Apex F1,
hit and miss.
But if we were like TikTokers properly, we'd have put a sneaky little clip of James Allen saying something interesting in the first 5 seconds of the show
I hate that.
made you wait we wouldn't have even stuck it in at the beginning. We'd have had this whole segment first, and then a long, drawn-out intro into the James Allen bit, and
Yeah,
then
I hate that.
finally we'd give you the James Allen.
So I hope Missed Apex listeners do appreciate that, because I know that, like, say we make an hour show, if we reach our maximum hour, which is my strict time limit, I know that lots of people will only be listening for half an hour because that's their commute to work, or the activity, or I want to mow the lawn and listen to the show. Or, as a lot of people have said, I put it on at bedtime and then I fall asleep in the middle. So I sort of know that. I never save anything. Just know this. I never save anything till the end. I never go, oh, you've got to tune in for an hour before you get to the James Allen interview. If we've got the interview like that, we put it at the front. When things happen on the race reviews, if there's that big crash or whatever that we want to talk about, we put that right up at the front. And I know, like, it's a bit of a battle with, I won't name the American co-host that I have this argument with, but no, because Matt sees so much detail in the practice and the build-up. And
I'm not going to name him, but Matt does this.
No, he's on board now, but he gets so much detail from, like, qualifying, and it's always, oh, well, it's a shame, because we had all these different things in qualifying. I know, but what's everyone thinking about right now is the Perez versus Magnussen, crash into the thing, or the strategy thing, and then. So we front load that stuff, and then if we've got time, we can dig into that kind of thing. So that's my tactic to content creation. Who knows? It's definitely not the TikTok way. But no. I feel like they're tricking people into listening for as long as possible, whereas I don't do that.
Oh yeah, of course. It's all marketing practices now.
I'm not very
and I
good at
do
that.
the same thing with clients. So.
You tell them to do that. Oh, you're the problem.
I know.
Anyway,
Soz.
If you want to follow Chris and find out how to trick people into watching content, it's at Chris on Racing.
You won't find that out, but what you will see this weekend, I'm in Budapest for round 4 of the GT Open this weekend. So come tag along. Is there a Grand Prix this weekend?
Spain,
it's Barcelona, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Dang it! Well, between if it doesn't clash, come in, tune in on YouTube.
All right, okay. And I will be watching the Spanish Grand Prix, so you can catch me Sunday at 8 p.m. UK. No. We'll be doing it shortly after the race this week because I've got time immediately after the race, so we're just going to get straight into it. But until we see you next, work hard, be kind, and have fun. This was Missed Apex Podcast.